welcome everyone on a wonderful Saturday evening, taking out the time for Rethinking UX virtual event. And we have an engaging event planned for all of you today, but today is a special day. And that I had kept special because today we turn one, almost, because Rethinking UX inception, I think it was launched on 29th Feb last year, which was leap year. And today we turned one. We have come a long way, and thanks to wonderful rethinkers across the globe. We have conducted around 90 plus community event in last 9 months, because the first event happened on 4th of April. We hosted 12,000 participants in last 1 year. 1,200 or 1,300 plus members on Slack. And I think by Sunday we will touch 15,000 followers on LinkedIn. And these are just the numbers. What matters the most is our vision and a mindset of giving back to community. And I always say this, that when I was coming up, and few of the folks who are part of this Rethinking UX, when we were coming up, we never had a helping hand, which we wanted at that point of time. So we thought, okay, let's create something where if there is someone who needs a helping hand in the industry, let's give them one. And I think this is also a way to give back to the community. But this celebration doesn't go well without thanking all the rethinkers who are part of this 1 year journey. When we started last year, we thought we will start a Hyderabad chapter because we were mostly in Hyderabad. But then COVID happened, and as Anirban said, because of the COVID, there was no boundary as such. We grew globally. Now we have chapters of APAC, Europe, India, Asia, all those. So thanks everyone for building the community. Nonetheless, there is a lot that goes behind the scene to even bring one initiative, and we have 13 different ones. So apart from me, there is Priya, she is from Seattle, Alok, he is from Bangalore, Pradeep, he is from Hyderabad again. And then there is extended team of folks, Nitin, who takes care of creatives, collaterals, as and when there is a time and the need. Garima, she takes care of the mentorship program, and without her and Akshay, it's not possible. And Manjari, every YouTube, even this one, even every recording that goes on YouTube, Manjari takes care that, okay, everything is streamlined, shortened, and then it goes to YouTube. So thanks everyone. And we are shifting gears in 2021. And there's a lot involved which we all are working on. Please use hand icon to ask questions or drop it on chat window. We will take a break after every questions and open up for any question that you may have. This will be an AMA, more interactive, more human rather than one-way communication. So keep your questions handy as and when we move ahead. And now let me take the opportunity to welcome Arundham Bhattacharya. And it's my privilege to host him today. Apart from being a founder, design leader, speaker, a teacher, mentor, and the list goes on, I think he is one of the finest design thinking practitioner who has seen and helped make the cultural change in an organization. And that's why this session is important even for me, because I'm on LinkedIn, all of us are. But when he writes and he speaks about experiential learning and pragmatic approach. So welcome Anirban, and the first question to you would be, who is Anirban? So over to you, Anirban, the stage is all yours.
Interesting, okay. Thank you, Mayur. Who is Anirban? Good one. So I think, first of all, in this forum, I probably am going to be one of the few non-designers. And I'm always delighted to be an outsider anyway, because it gives me perspective on the little, psychological distance between who I am and where I choose to operate. So I've been in industry now for close to 27 years. Spent the first 16 years of my life in various, corporate spaces, working in all parts of the world. And last 11 years, I've been on an entrepreneurial journey. Started by my partner, Sony, who started the company, The Painted Sky. We have been a corporate learning and development, leadership development firm for the now 15 plus years. And as the name suggests, we were one of the pioneers of using art as a methodology. So in that little corner picture that you see me wearing this black jacket, it is actually a painting in the background. Those guys are posing with their artwork where they decided to paint the vision of the company and how they see themselves as a part of it, and what they thought would be drivers to make it happen, for the lack of a better word. So that's it. So that's how we started. I'm a non-designer, but I have a marketing background, so I've always been very curious about buying behavior, primarily consumer behavior, as to why people do what they do, why they buy what they buy. And so part of my marketing work, we've always looked at, without even stepping onto the design turf, but we looked at brand personalities, personas, kind of stuff from different directions. So then I came across design thinking 10 years ago, 11 years ago actually, and I studied it formally. Then started practicing it back in 2010. You have to understand that 2010, the market was very different, and nobody cared really about user experience design beyond the space of designers. Businesses were happily working on a cost arbitrage model, where lowest cost won them contracts. And the way things were shaped, the way things were working, design thinking, for the first maybe 3-4 years, we did almost nothing in it. But we continued to have it as an offering. Things have started to change in the last, I would say since 2016 is when we have started to see change for various reasons. Right from technology disruption to changing nature of the workforce, to further globalization, to the rise of startups. Suddenly, human experience, and I'm like Don Norman, I don't like the word user too much. I think Social Dilemma had that beautiful term that I think only drug traffickers call their customers users.
Yeah.
So I think human experience became important, and I think that's when we started to get a lot of work. So now we do a lot of work in the space of design thinking. Started off as corporate work. Essentially, there were two drivers for this demand for me at that point in time. I would say one was companies, gigantic enterprise technology companies were coming and telling us, you know what, our business has moved to the cloud, or software as a service has come in, and we have done 20 years of coding or writing code where the developer had never had to face the customer. But suddenly the distance between customer and the developer has disappeared. Help us understand what is a customer, who's a customer, and how can we address those needs. So a lot of that happened. The other thing that also happened was we had some very smart designer colleagues, designer clients, who in those early stages came to us saying that so far for many years, design has been a fringe performance or a fringe function in an entity, in an organization, a large company, where we were asked to make shiny things or put a button here or change the shade of blue from this to that. Now we see a demand where design can be right at the center of an organization's culture, or an organization's driving force, life, I would say. So help business understand what design does, or design thinking can do. And so that's where this journey started. So that's been going on. Now our design thinking work is, I think, very significant. We do over, close to over 1,000 odd workshops in a year, and that's growing. Surprisingly, it's very seamlessly grew into the virtual world. We run workshops. One more part about Who's Anirban, of course, that in 2018-19, I thought, after doing it about 8-9 years, I haven't really done anything for my own development. I mean, I was learning on the job, but I've become very execution focused. We're delivering results very well, but so I went to Hasselplattner Institute in Potsdam, outside Berlin, Potsdam University, and became a design thinking coach. So I do a lot of work in that space now. This is essentially very, very niche, very, very focused coaching assignments with people, with groups, with teams, which could be, software teams to consumer products, to, all kinds of companies. So it's been a very interesting journey. And now we are on the verge of launching what would be the first innovation coaching certification program anywhere I know, where we are going to bring in design thinking coaching with executive coaching and bring these two together to build a new breed of leaders, hopefully, who could not just lead innovation, but also catalyze innovation within their organizations by coaching others to innovate better. So that comes live early March. And so that's who I am. That's what I do. I live in Bangalore.
Yeah.
I have 4 children, 2 human and 2 dog. And that's it. That's it. That's me.
Phenomenal. So actually, I wanted to write an intro for you, but then I thought I think I won't be able to do justice to what all you have done.
Didn't throw a bouncer at me because I'm not used to introducing myself. I was figuring out how to answer the question.
Yep. So thanks, Anirban. So this session is not about learning the basics of design thinking, because this session is all about going beyond the basics and finding the recipe from someone who has seen the industry, who has made the organizations grow culturally and even with a good mindset for the innovation. For past 50 years, design thinking has been taking shapes until the early 90s, when consulting firm IDEO began using it to solve large business problems. I think let's go beyond what design thinking is and get into the problems, challenges, and how Anirban solves these. So the first question first, the term design thinking can be a misnomer, and because the word design, it should be because of the word design itself, because the moment you go to anyone and say, okay, we are a design thinker or we will conduct design thinking, they think that, okay, it is a designer specific methodology. So something on this, how do you hear this on day-to-day basis, Anirban? Design thinking isn't design, or design thinking is design. How do you explain this?
I would say that I used to hear this a lot a few years ago, where there was a lot of confusion about what is design thinking. And the moment you start talking design thinking, people would think that, you know what, this is what designers do, or we have a UX team that does that anyway. Why are you talking to me?
Yeah.
I think over the last few years, for better or for worse, for whatever reasons, things have changed. I would say design thinking has become somewhat of a central conversation point for various organizations, and we see some very good results. So I don't really hear that I mean, the confusion of what is design thinking, whether it is design, isn't probably that much there. But of course, for people coming in contact with it for the first time, might still have that. So I completely agree with you that design thinking isn't design. But then let me ask, what do you see as design? I mean, how do you, or how would someone define design? Let me ask back something. I mean, it's ask me anything, so let me also do the asking.
Yes. Anyone from the audience, you can.
How do you define design if you have to look at it as a definition?
Yep. Anyone from audience, you can unmute and then answer.
Is it about defining design or defining design thinking?
Design.
Okay, design is something which can be replicated, any form of art or anything that can be measured and then repeated.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That's my definition of design.
Design is, can I?
Of course.
Yeah. So design is a process of identifying challenges and problems in any, let's say, existing, process, a system, and come up with a solution which can be, appropriate to the person or user who is using that system or process or interface.
Sure. Very good. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, most of you are probably, the reason you are in a UX session is that you are working with users, you're looking at experiences. So to me also, it's exactly the same thing. So to me, I think the way I see it also is a way to solve problems and for human beings and improve human experiences. That's how I look at it. Now, in the many years that we have worked, we have seen what would those experiences be. At a very limited, I think at a very limited level, it is about building solutions. But what we have seen over the last few years has been that it has developed enormously. For instance, almost 40% of the work we do in my firm is working with organizations and trying to help improve, let's say, stuff like employee engagement, developing the right culture for continuous learning, improving, reducing attrition, etc. Now, the way we have seen it, maybe also because Mayur and the others, that maybe we are not designers by background, we have approached design thinking, therefore, as a driver for finding better ways of doing things. Okay. And in typical design thinking sense, particularly in my way of doing it, in my firm's way of doing it, we spend enormous amount of time understanding the problem. And I would say 50-60% of our work is often into discovery of the problem. And because we believe that if you can find that, and if you find that right, you can solve things faster with less number of iterations, your time to market improves, your effectiveness improves, your number of failures come down, all that kind of stuff. So I think what we've seen is, therefore, design, if you look at it from the conventional definition to what we are doing, is far beyond just that way of creating solutions or solving problems. We are working at larger things. So when we work with government agencies, helping them design educational curriculums for government schools, or entrepreneurial mindset, developing curriculums for that, to NGOs, to students, to all kinds of people, to gigantic corporate houses where we have trained thousands and thousands of people. It's about moving the needle and helping people who are not necessarily user-centric understand the need to be human-centric, right? So to me, to go back to your question, design thinking isn't design, but it does begin with design.
Yeah.
It borrows from design that you need to figure out who is it that you're solving for, rather than create something for the sake of creation. Your feature creep. And I have a friend of mine who's a very senior tech leader today, who was also an ex-client, who used to say that we are engineers engineering for engineers. We never really thought about who the guy or a lady in a different country, in a different context, will be using what we are building. So when we start pushing that towards business, that's where I think the application of design as a process, as a philosophy comes in. But I think design thinking also goes a lot beyond design. It expands the approach by bringing in business skills, by building business relevance. So for instance, if you have to make a solution work, you need to learn how to communicate internally, collaborate with others, stakeholder management, influencing, all kinds of stuff come in. And design thinking, if it's done well, not just focuses on following the 5 or the 6 or the 4 steps, whatever it is, wherever you've chosen to learn it from, but also drive towards greater change by leveraging design as a process or a philosophy, but also making it, more universal, by making people who are non-designers understand the value of it and apply it.
Yeah.
So I think it takes the principles of design to everyone, and I think that's what I love about it. So the need for design is there in design thinking. And of course, we need designers in a lot of ways to probably render the solutions. Because at the end of a design thinking journey, somebody who's learned, let's say, design thinking even in depth, I would safely say hasn't become a designer. And so I think that's one part. But by knowing what he's learned, he can now solve problems better. And what we have seen, our success has been that in many cases, in many companies, this has become the central language for the organization. That whether you are hiring people, to choosing vendors, to managing finance, to doing administration, you're constantly asking, am I being human-centered? Am I putting the user or the stakeholder at the center of my process of solving the problems? Or am I being product-focused, or whatever it is, otherwise I would conventionally be? So I think, yes, it isn't design in the conventional way, but it takes the conversation beyond design, is what I have experienced in the last 10 odd years, 10, 11 years now.
Yep. Thanks, Anirban. And I think design thinking fundamentally changes the fabrics of your organization and the business, because as you said, that it brings different stakeholders on the same platform, same page, for finding right problem and then to innovate. There are a few answers on the comment also. DT is a mindset, design is the rendering of intent. What we also did, Anirban, is while in the registration form, we had asked the participants to drop in few questions. So I think, Manjri, if you're around, you can ask your question now. Manjri, You're on mute.
Thanks, Mayur.
Yeah.
So, hi, Anirban. It's really nice connecting with you, and I'm again thankful to RethinkingUX for providing this platform where we can connect with amazing thinking practitioners as you are. So, my question to you would be that we are aware that DT sessions are hands-on activities based, and at times we get extremely time bounded to an extent that a session requiring, let's say, an X amount of time or X amount of days is forced upon us to be executed, let's say, in half the time or perhaps even less. So, how to manage a DT content? I mean, the areas we are covering in a DT process. Uh, to conduct it and to convey the process to the audience. I mean, how less is too less for a DT content and how much is too much for a DT content?
Okay, I think that's a straightforward question, and if I had an answer to that question, I would probably, I don't know, have a few millions and millions of dollars in my bank. I mean, the fact is, that's always tricky, Manjari, and I think for us, where we are always designing content, designing programs, I think it's tricky because typically people who are coming to us have a laundry list of expectations, but are not necessarily in the position to give it the kind of time or effort that it needs, and that happens often. So we have also learned it over the last decade of working that, there are, you have to focus on two things. What is the outcome of the learning that the client is seeking? And what is the impact of the learning the client is seeking? And based on that, we come back and say that if you are looking at, let us say, just to give you an example, if you are saying, develop a design thinking mindset. Now we, for instance, over and above design thinking as a process, we also practice the six attitudes of design thinking, which is something that we run as workshops. This is something we are trained in. Then there is also design thinking skills. For instance, how do you interview better? How do you ask questions without bias? How do you brainstorm in a corporate context fearlessly? All kinds of skills come in, right? So it's not just the process. Now, if somebody comes and says that, yes, we want the whole 9 yards and really help our teams become experts, but we can give you 3 sessions of 2 hours each, and we very apologetically tell them that's not going to happen. If this is what you're ready to invest in, this is what you can get. Whereas a lot of our clients who are now committed because they have piloted it, seen the value, and therefore they've gone ahead, are engaging on 6-8 month journeys on project-based learning experiences, where there's training which happens, followed by project-based coaching and mentoring. Again, we are certified to do those, and we end up therefore delivering 2 outcomes. One is that if you pick up a business opportunity to work on, then you see a result, a POC or a minimum lovable product or something comes out of it. At the same time, by spending 3 to 6 months maybe on a project, immersing yourself in it, you have imbibed human-centered thinking into what you do. And then the outcome therefore gets developed. So to me, for people who have that challenge, I always say that we follow a very straightforward approach. We ask the client, what do you see as success? What would success look like? What are the desired outcomes? What would you like people to do differently? More of or less of? Now, if you tell me you want these things to be changed, I will come back and say that this can be done in maybe 4 modules of 2 hours each kind of a workshop, or it will take 3 months of engagement. Now it's your call. So Manjari, to the point, I've always maintained that, I run a training organization, even beyond design thinking. And this conversation happens, people ask us, so what is the ROI of training that you can show? Because, and I always say, what is the I you are willing to make? The return on investment is driven by the investment one makes. And I'm talking about the client. We are there to kind of help you tick the box and say, okay, design thinking ho gaya. And you do a 2-hour overview program and you tell them this is how it is done. You do a couple of exercises. People walk away thinking, okay, I've understood what is design thinking or the fundamentals of it. Or go beyond, and that beyond can be anything, right? So I think that's how it is. we never really look at this as a constraint, but we pass it back to the client saying, this is what you want, this is what you need to think, or this is what you need to do.
Thanks, Anirban.
Hope that answers your question, Manjri. And like this will help Manjri, because she is scheduled to conduct a design thinking session for 120 like university hires next week. So hope that input will help her in NCR. But then, like Anirban, I think like the same is true even for the internal customer. If you are like working, if you are doing a design thinking session with your engineers, developers, or product managers, the same holds true. What the outcome like do you need, and then the impact that you want from this, because there can be many goals that you can have: goal 1, goal 2, goal 3. What you put it on the paper and what you start or try to achieve. That's what I think. It is both for internal and the external client, right?
Always. So we have had cases where we are working with, let's say, one of the world's largest German automotive firms. I mean, you know them as the biggest, one of the best car manufacturers in the world. And they came to us a few years ago saying, we have a leadership offsite. This was the time when we were doing things face to face. We have a leadership offsite and we have about 2 hours. Give us a kind of a download on what is design thinking. And I said, okay, we can do that. But what do you want to achieve from here? Why do you want to do design thinking? I think that's a question I often ask, because ever since design thinking has become so popular, people come and say, let's do design thinking. And my pushback is why? And many times we find that you need to do something else maybe. And so it's important to ask that question. And they say, okay, we have this challenge that we believe we are doing a lot of things for our people, but this is happening, that is not happening. And we need to therefore figure it out. I said, you really expect this to happen in 2 hours? To the credit of the organization, it had one of the finest or the smartest CEOs I've worked with. And in 5 minutes, he understood that what I was talking about. So he says, so what do you need? I said, this is what you probably need. You need to look at the challenge first. Ask the why question. You're doing the what, you're doing the how, but you have no idea of the why. And to do that, we need longer engagement. So you would not believe it, Mayur, but that 2-hour session became a 4-month journey where the MD and the 14 board members, all VPs, many of them expats, we would spend every 2 weeks, 3 hours together. In between, they would have, assignments on going and doing empathy research, coming back, they will do more brainstorming, etc., etc. And at the end of it, we created a culture document for the organization. They created a culture document for the organization that helped them essentially look at employee engagement from a completely different lens. So I think often enough, I've also seen that clients have the appetite, but they need to be convinced. And that's where I think our own conviction of what it can do comes in. I see too many times there are people who are going and promising the moon. I mean, you have to hammer, you have to change a light bulb and somebody will say, let's do design thinking for it. I'm a little skeptical about that. So I think it's important to build the credibility so that the client listens to you, whether internal or external, and then it kind of happens. And I think we've been doing it for a long time. So I won't say there's a playbook for it, but there are ways in which this can be done.
No, I think like you put it quite aptly. I think that's the role of a good design leader or a leader to convey the value that this design thinking or like design in your organization brings on the table. We can talk about it that we are not being heard, but if you're not being heard, that means we have failed in some way, somewhere. So I think partially like we should also blame us. I think like we will talk on this more in our next question, which I am throwing on to you, Anirban.
Yes.
Has the design thinking become a victim of its own success, and why? Because now it is treated as a buzzword.
Good one. I was expecting this. I think there are many ways of looking at it. I think I would say yes and no. And let me start with the no first. Okay. What we have seen because of the growth we have seen success, we have seen incredible solutions emerge. We have had great feedback on culture change that has happened. I think design thinking has gone a long way to make human centricity important in organizations that traditionally never really considered it to be something to look at. Okay. Just this morning in our team meeting, one of my colleagues said, after a workshop for one of the world's largest enterprise software companies, one of the participants said, after 22 years, I've realized the value of human interactions in the work I do.
Yeah.
Now, it's a surprising statement coming from a senior leader, but that's the way things have been. We have never asked people to, let's say, be empathetic. And suddenly one fine day we tell them, you need to be empathetic, and nobody has a clue how to.
Yeah.
So I think design thinking pushes people to move in that direction, and with enough success stories, convinces in the need of that. And we have enough success stories to share, right? So I think that's important. It's become relevant. And in a lot of ways, and I've heard this from a lot of designer friends of mine, it has upgraded the value of design as a function within the organization in the eyes of business, which otherwise never really looked at design as a core function or something that you really need to focus on. Now, so that's the no part of it, to your question.
Yeah.
The yes part of it, I think, yes, because, and I think the problem here is, and this is my perspective, you are welcome to disagree with me or throw something back at me, is that design thinking appears very easy and intuitive. I mean, think of it, it's not just design thinking, but anywhere, any function or any space you're operating in, don't you always hear, know your customer before you sell something to the customer, or know who your other side is if you're going to negotiate. Even in a presentation skills program, we would say, know your audience. So if you start telling people that you need to know people who you're solving for, hey, you obviously need to do that. It's obvious, it's intuitive. And of course, you talked about IDEO, the Stanfords of the world, or the Dardens of the world, where I went, or HPIs for that matter. There is this huge focus on the process. You have 5 circles or 6 circles and arrows flying from here to there, and you look at it and you think, okay, ये तो easy है ना, इसमें problem क्या है? It's so simple to do. So I think the problem happens when you kind of dumb it down or reduce it to just a process, and so everybody believes you can do it.
Yeah.
So there is an incredible amount of depth and rigor one needs to go in, because design thinking isn't the process at all. To me, design thinking's power lies in understanding human psychology. And no two human beings, I've seen 62 people on this call, I can safely say there could be 60 different types of people here.
Sure.
And if I have to create an experience for 60 different types of people, I cannot say that just knowing 5 circles will help me. Sadly, this is where the problem, it's become a quick fix. And design thinking kar lete hai becomes like something you do, but nobody ever succeeded doing design thinking in that way, in my opinion. And what has happened, and I mentioned this in a recent post also, that there are too many of this MOOC-driven, YouTube video watching or read these books. I'm sorry, I have never found, and I'm going to say this, and you can beat me up for it, I've never found any value in any design thinking book that I've ever read. So when people come to me and they say, tell me, recommend a book, I say, read maybe Daniel Kahneman or read Don Norman. Because the moment you're writing a book, you're trying to again talk about the process. Maybe Jean Lidker's work, where she talks about applications and the projects she's done in the real world, have some impact. But you can't, this is learning by doing, and you have to work with the people who have done it, who have, the proverbial dust on the shoes. I mean, I cannot train anyone on empathizing if you don't get out there and sit in front of a shop, with the shopkeeper, or when you're working with India's largest e-commerce company, and the team has never met who they are supposed to solve for, and they are talking fancy stuff, all designers, okay, and they're all MBAs from the best of places, and we need to do this, and there's a lot of jargon. And my question is, so how much time have you spent with them? And I'm looking at blank faces. So I think this is the problem. And somebody has come and sold this to them, that this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the problem is. I think it's very important that we invest in the right things of design thinking. I can explain design thinking to somebody in 5 minutes. But after 11 years, I don't think I know enough of design thinking, probably to write a book at least, or to consider myself to be even good at it. I'm learning. And every workshop, every interaction teaches me something. And I'm like always going, wow, I didn't think of that. So one of the design thinking mindsets we talk about, Mayur, is, embracing uncertainty.
Yeah.
And another one is being open to possibilities. I think design thinking is beautiful because it opens us up to possibilities, that the best solution can come from anywhere or anyone.
Yeah.
But if we focus just on the process, often enough we miss those things. And I think there, I would say, yes, it has been a victim of, it's become too much of a buzzword. It's become too much of a, what can I say? It does leave a bad taste in the mouth. Exactly. We have been often called in to undo the damage done by other people.
Yeah.
Recently, we were exchanging notes on that people, and what happens with that is people now have gone through this quick fix design thinking workshop, and they think they know design thinking, and they don't think it works because they have had a poor experience or exposure to it, and then they become blockers to actually running design thinking in the organization. And so it's tough to then, I say it's like bringing the disbeliever back into the flock. How do you bring somebody back to say that, this is not the way design thinking should be done or should have been done in the first place? So yeah, so I think that's happened. I can't walk away from that.
Yeah. So I won't ask you which e-commerce company you were talking about, but yeah, on the serious note, I think until 5 years back, even I used to think that design thinking is some kind of hype. People do talk about it, go and give presentation, conduct a workshop, and make money. But I think, as you like rightly mentioned, if you want to take out the value from this, you have to actually do it. You don't have to talk about it.
You're absolutely right. So I'm sorry to butt in. I mean,
it's okay.
A lot of times people say, "Oh, I hate PowerPoint. It's easy to. I mean, PowerPoint bashing is fashionable. Design thinking bashing is fashionable too."
Yeah.
I'll get to that in a second. But PowerPoint is a way to something. You create a crappy presentation. It's not PowerPoint's fault.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the way it is. You do a bad job with it, you can't blame the thing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of this, and I'm going to say this because you and I are friends and you have the maturity, I always say this, is also a result of a lot of insecurity I find in designers, in the inability to understand what it is doing for them, how good it is for them, how it makes their jobs more secure. Because business starts, so a lot of times we have been hired by designers to say, please help us make design relevant in our organization.
Mm-hmm.
And after business have decided, did design thinking and understood the value of it, came back and started asking questions to designers, and the same designers saying, oh, whoa, you're stepping on my toes, you're coming into my turf. So I think it's little insecurity there. I think mature folks need to understand that this is good for everyone.
Yeah.
But yes, it has happened.
True. I see Sai, she has raised hand. Sai, go ahead.
Yeah, hello Anirban. I think you spoke about uncertainty and ambiguity. So my question was around, especially in the new context, right? A lot of organizations are now pushed towards uncertainty. And how do you sort of make the customer, or how do you yourself, you meaning myself as a solution designer, sense and co-sense, in a very implicit way, tacit way, without trying to problem solve, right?
Yeah.
Because, that's my question.
That's a good one. I'm right now coaching a business, a family-owned business based out of Chennai, into Ayurvedic cosmetics. Very interesting. For the first time in 50 odd years, they have looked at design thinking to rediscover relevance. And it's a very interesting project. And we were just talking about this, that they are going out and doing research right now. Look, I don't consider myself an expert in it, but I can only say that the best results we have heard, or we have had, is when we don't have too much of an agenda and we are there with empathy to just listen and learn. Okay. Too often, if we have an outcome focus, maybe an outcome bias, and it could be a confirmation bias, it's a solution fixation, as I call it, that comes in. It starts to impact the way we ask questions, the way we engage, etc. I think the best interviews, etc., are where we are there to discover, where we are there to just listen and learn, and that's it. So I think we have seen some results there. I would say that happens the best. Now, the other side of it is, of course, that it's something that we keep doing to get better. I believe in the 3 L's, as I call it: listen, to clients and listen to participants, they have a lot of stories to tell you, and we need to listen better. We need to learn about business. We need to do a lot of homework. We need to understand the nuances of it, what's worked, what's not, their competitors, their market, their context. And we need to leverage what exists. I think it's important for us to not try to overnight make an elephant dance. Things happen slowly. We need to invest and leverage what exists and move it into the directions that work for us. So I think it's a long process. I don't know whether your question is truly a design thinking question, but I think from learning designers that we work with, there's a lot of maturity that we need to bring in to kind of collaborate and build these solutions. And we do that. Can I say that we are successful 100% of the times? Of course not. But I think it's a journey that we enjoy being on.
Thanks, Sai. We have one from Rishi Tak from Mumbai, from our registration form, and then we will take one more on this one from Harshit. Rishi, can you please go ahead? Rishi, are you around? Okay, Harshit, why don't you go ahead?
Hey, thanks, Mayur. Anirban, thanks for kind of enlightening us on some of this, and just a few things from my experiences. So I learned design thinking in Stanford almost a decade back, with the same idea folks in the D school. I think just a few observations which I have seen, and I would want your comments on it. I think the way we have seen people approach design thinking in India is rather, like you mentioned, right, a little bit too superficial from a process standpoint rather than from a standpoint of why they want to do it. And hence, I would want your opinion saying that, hey, can we look at a process which is a little bit more dumbed down for us to say that let's keep the process aside, but let people very experientially learn something from this and then evolve it from there. So I'm sure you would have done so many experimental workshops with your clients. Is there some nuance which you have found out really helps clients uncover the process bit and really appreciate the design thinking methodology?
It's a good question, actually. I think yes. See, ideally, all of us, if we are in design thinking and we place design thinking at the center of what we do, we love the process, we love the philosophy, we love the principles, all of that. The challenge is how do we translate that love or transfer that love to others who are probably coming from outside with A, lack of knowledge, and B, maybe some degree of skepticism. Right. So I think in an ideal world, all our clients should be all ready to invest in the long haul. And often enough, that's not the case. Design thinking is a buzzword. As I said, a lot of people come to us saying, we want to calendarize it, or we want to make everybody go through it, and which is good. I mean, I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm also a businessman. I'm running a business and I cannot say no to that. But there, I'll go back to my earlier question. I asked them, what is the outcome you're seeking? If you want to go deeper, so when we work with, let's say, a government who wants to create an education curriculum, and we apply design thinking to research with students, teachers, parents, educators to understand what really should work, and based on this, education curriculum changes, I think it takes a lot of convincing. It takes a lot of jumping through a lot of hoops, many of them of fire. But we succeed because I think we are committed and we are focused on it. Not always will everybody be ready. And in that case, yes, starting with a quick fix, a pilot, getting people excited about it, getting some quick projects done, getting some quick wins could get the appetite going and get people interested and then engaged. And that often happens. But I understand your challenge also about how do you make it really deep? We've been fortunate that I would say almost 40% of our clients, and we work with everybody from alphabetically and Adidas to a World Bank. We have been very fortunate that we have had smart leaders who have understood the value of it, and understood the value of it maybe pretty quickly. And they have pushed further. So, a design thinking workshop becomes a design thinking driven project. A design thinking project becomes something that makes us open Ubiquity, which became India's first design thinking school. That's in Bangalore. And we did certificate programs. Now we are going into design thinking based coaching certification. Because it's a crying need, and companies are coming in telling us, and all of this is client driven. It's not that we have come up with this idea one fine day. It's when, one of our very important clients is, let's say, Adobe, and Adobe's finance team, Raghuram Krishnan, who's the CFO. He brought design thinking to Adobe's finance function. And it's transformed the way the company looks at its finance today. Right from interactions to the report generations to outputs like dashboards. But the culture has changed around that. And it's a massive success story. So people like him would come and tell us that, we are good in innovation, but we can't coach others. So how do you do that? So we come up with this certification program in it. So I think it's been a laborious process step by step, but we are seeing that change. So Harshit, to conclude my answer to your question, I think what you're saying has also kind of evolved over the last few years. I think maturity, success stories have come out. Another client of ours is an NGO, and we do a lot of work with them, and they are into mass entrepreneurship and helping educate at the grassroots level. And we have had some very interesting success by coaching their teams to figure out how street side ironwalas can change their experience applying design thinking principles. So all kinds of experience have happened, and those success stories have kind of generated more interest. And I think today a lot of clients come to us willing to go the long haul. So things are getting better, I would say. We're not there yet, but it's getting better.
Sure. Thanks, Anirban.
Thanks, Harshit. Ganesh, please park your question for the end of the session. We have one or two more questions to go. So Anirban, the next one is design thinking as a corporate checkbox. Is it a hammer for every nail?
Well, it shouldn't be. There's no doubt about that. I think again, it's coming from maybe misunderstanding, lack of understanding, all kinds of things. But over and above that, I think it's also because it's the way it's been sold. So as I keep giving an example, I mean, if your light bulb goes bust, do you apply design thinking to change a light bulb? Mm-hmm. And there are enough people who would say, we should do it because we'll find some output. So that's where the problem has been. I think to me, design thinking, I only look at design thinking, and I tell my clients that all the time. I've tell my clients that please don't apply design thinking here. It's not useful. Is where there is a strong human stakeholder footprint. Various stakeholders, internal, external, influencers, all kinds of people. And second, it's a non-linear problem. So it's not an obvious solution. It's complex. It's wicked in the language of design and designers that we say. So I think it shouldn't be a hammer to every nail. I would again go back to my previous answer that yes, and I would say that yes, a lot of times people come to us saying, let's cover X number of people in design thinking. It's a kind of assembly line approach to design thinking, and we would tell them clearly that if you do only this much, this is what you will get as a result. There's a learning curve conversation that we have that people forget 50% of what they learned within, I think, the first 6 hours of that program getting over.
Yeah.
And so I'm very cognizant of it, and I make my clients cognizant of it. That's one part. But at the same time, there are others also who are coming and saying, yes, we want to go more. We want to do more. We want to go deeper.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the real, I would say, the cherry is, or that's where the real joy is for us as well as them, because they see results, and those are the corporates who keep coming back. They keep reinvesting in it. And I think we are very successful, or we are fortunate, I could say, that we have seen some success, that companies continue to work with us, or I wouldn't even say work with us, but continue to remain invested in design thinking across the board. And I think that's a big driver for change. So yeah, shouldn't be.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we as a designer, we have also not done a pretty good job in communicating what is a meeting, what is a workshop, what is a design thinking session, because we have come back with some result during design thinking session, though it was a meeting. So I think we need to be quite serious, and I think it should be a conscious effort from everyone. That,
Yeah.
okay, when to use meeting, when to use workshop, when to use design thinking sessions, and by doing so, you will also educate the organization and the culture, and like you'll bring that design culture into it.
Yeah.
Currently, what is happening is every organization, everyone is doing design thinking, although they are doing meetings or maybe small workshop, design workshop. So that is also hitting somewhere. So
Again, the fact is, I would say that know your outcome.
yeah,
This is what you're willing to do, or this is how much you're willing to invest, and this is what you'll get.
yeah,
I mean, we are not in the magic business, so you can't invest 2 hours and expect dramatic results that will change the way. I mean, the greatest things in sliced bread. It won't happen. World hunger won't go away. So I keep saying that you decide on your outcome, and then we can give you what you want based on that.
sure, sure. Ganesh, why don't you go now?
Yeah. My question is like, if you're design thinking, yeah, we know that, but the same competitive practice is like an agile manifest. No, now the agile is the best evolving practice. It having the same collaboration, showing the best results. So the problem is here, what I'm seeing, design thinking process not seeing a central evolving practice. Maybe, we understand, every day, maybe we can, what areas, improvising, how is going, those kind of central evolving process I'm not seeing. Could you give your thoughts?
Well, I think I would disagree with you because to me, and I disagree on 2 levels, Ganesh, and here's why. One is, to me, seeing and knowing Agile very up close, Agile to me is often a means to an end. And I think design thinking shouldn't be. Design thinking is about changing the way we are. We'll choose to live, the culture of our lives, our organizations, etc. So again, if we compare design thinking to Agile, I think we are doing disservice to both. It reduces design thinking into, again, what I fear, a process which people believe that they can master by learning some tools. I call it the tyranny of tools. And I'm very worried about that when we bring that in. If you look at design thinking the right way, design thinking is at the center of various extremely successful organizations, from an Intuit to a Pepsi to so many I can keep talking about, where we also see that. We also work with many. We have managed to put design thinking at the center of, billion-dollar companies out of India and beyond. It is because they have understood the value of design thinking. Now, after appreciating the value of design thinking, after understanding, internalizing it, they may also then look at Agile or Lean, or there's so many other processes to get to the outcome, right? So there is nothing wrong with that, right with that, there's no conflict. I think it's important that you see design thinking in the right frame. Design thinking, at least for me, and I'm not wanting to come across as a Puritan, but to me, design thinking can really be central to the way an organization exists. And there are so many organizations that are choosing to become that. And companies or organizations that never looked at it are now fully invested in it and are pushing us to scale up, to offer more, to build new solutions so that they can build capabilities that design thinking becomes the central driving force for whether building products, to hiring better, to recruit, to retaining talent, to better collaboration, everything. So I think that's what we are seeing. So I would say it is extremely beautifully evolving in my eyes, and I'm experiencing that. When I went back to the Hasso-Plattner Institute last year, I was actually surprised with how much it has evolved. So I would actually tell everybody on this, I think it's very important that we upgrade our skills and knowledge in that process, so that we can become better. And I think that's what we are seeing. So I would say it is extremely beautifully evolving in my eyes, and I'm experiencing that. When I went back to the Hasso-Plattner Institute last year, I was actually surprised with how much it has evolved. So I would actually tell everybody on this, I think it's very important that we upgrade our skills and knowledge in that process, a lot has changed, a lot of new things have come in. It's important that we think of it from that side. But good question though.
Yeah. Karthik, you can go next.
Hey Anirban, Mayur, thank you for the opportunity and very good evening. I am
Good evening.
based out of Bangalore. So you kind of answered the question of Ganesh, and I kind of got an understanding about what you're trying to talk about design thinking.
Karthik, I can hear you.
Sorry, is this better now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Much better.
Yeah, so I kind of got an understanding when you answered Ganesh's question that design thinking is a central approach. But what I'm compelled to ask is if design thinking is a continuous approach or it's just like a quality improvement process that we work with on a given scale to scale up operation to reduce the cost of to improve the quality of business. So how can a company, I work in the media industry, how can a company go about implementing this centrally? Because there are a lot of challenges I do see on a given day-to-day basis.
Yeah, I think that's a good one. I think you need to put yourself on mute. There's an echo. Thank you,
Sorry,
Patrick.
is this better now? Sorry.
Yes, absolutely. Great.
There's been a power cut at my residence, hence, yeah.
No problem. No, I think I'm getting an echo from your mic. You can mute yourself.
You can go on mute, Karthik.
So I think it's not easy. Let me put it very simply, because it's not a straightforward process. You're trying to help people change the way they have been brought up, educated, what they have found corporate success in. Suddenly you tell people that you need to be more human-centered or empathetic. It's not easy. It doesn't sit easily for people. But I think it's more a challenge of influencing rather than design. If we get good stakeholders, if we get good patrons, and we have had that fortune again, I think there are two things we have seen successfully, I would say, that have succeeded in integrating design thinking at the core of what we do or who we are. One is leadership blessing. So I personally believe that design thinking is a culture piece, and culture change is top down. So if you have, let's say, leaders like Mayur who are convinced, and you are lucky enough to work with such people, then maybe you're on a strong footing and it becomes easier for them to therefore drive that change across functions, across teams, organizations, etc. The second is, of course, that it's again going back to how much the client is willing to invest, how much your company is willing to invest, or any company is willing to invest. You cannot transform anyone or anything by doing a 2-day workshop. And let's be absolutely honest. If anyone is trying to communicate that is, pardon my French, utter bullshit, right? So if the organization is serious about transformation, it has to bring itself to the table. And I have no problems pushing back an organization saying you're wasting my time and yours by saying transform something, but I'm willing to only do this much. So if you are ready to then invest in business opportunities and trying out design thinking, again, approach it like a project. Let's look at investing 6 months on improving employee retention, or 3 months, or whatever, I don't know. And then apply it, get coached on it, do it seriously, have your milestone meetings, bring the results to the bigger organization that happens out of it. More often than not, we have seen success, and then it's kind of snowballs. Then it kind of creates the right amount of ripples. We have so many organizations where we work in, let's say, companies like Oracles of the world, where Adobe's of the world, where one group's success has led to 5 groups wanting to now do design thinking. And we are often struggling to scale because of the demand growing suddenly. And because now everybody wants to do it. So I think starting small, having smaller success stories, but pushing forward really, really helps. And I think a lot of it, also my final point is to remind that at the end of it, it is about upgrading ourselves. It's about upgrading ourselves as trainers, facilitators, and coaches and practitioners, as well as people. And that's what we are wanting to put it across to people, to companies, that this helps you at the end develop into a better organization. And that kind of has worked. I hope that answers you.
Thank you, Anirban, for this, for your session today. Yeah, I kind of got an understanding. I have not done the course with myself, but I kind of know that, how it definitely help the processes, which is working in silos and, shared services model, to put together to be a larger
We
enterprise.
do a lot of work with shared services. We do a lot of work with shared services from Tesco's of the world, to Vodafone's and Gadgets and CY's of the world. Again, if you have a human stakeholder you're trying to solve for, and that does not necessarily mean the end customer. If you are a developer and you want to understand how a product manager, you can help your product manager. You're a QA guy who's thinking of how to manage better results for the work that I'm doing. You could try design thinking, and we've seen some great success and some great solutions coming out of it. So I think what we are discovering is the universality of design thinking today. It's. I think Raymond Loewy, the great designer, many moons ago had said, design is too important to be left to designers. And I think that we are seeing at play, and companies across the board, functions across the board are applying it and seeing results, provided they should be doing design thinking there and not something else. That's always the case. I am somebody who will never push design thinking down anyone's throat. You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Mayur.
I think we are beyond our time, 7:30. So I'll put a hard one on you. I'll club two questions: design thinking, a glorified 2 to 3 days workshop, and some mantra or gyan for facilitating virtual design thinking workshop. And I think that will be all.
All right. I think the first part I've already answered, that you can do a great 2 to 3 day workshop, provided the client is expecting the outcomes from a 2 to 3 day workshop, which is what it can be, right? So I won't even go beyond that. If this is what you're willing to, and I am again saying this in apps with total responsibility, changing a human being isn't just the coach or the consultant's responsibility, because we are there for 16 hours with you. What are you going to do as an organization to cement that change, to reinforce that change? So design thinking is one of the things our company does. We are big into change management, stakeholder management kind of work. And it's very important that people realize that, first of all, there should be a desire for change. Only then can we build the skills for change. And then the company has to do enough to reinforce. So 2 to 3 day workshop, I won't diss it. It has its use, but that's its use. I won't go beyond to say that it will help you, it'll be unlikely that it'll transform you into a greater self-actualized human being. So that's one part of it. The second thing, tips of facilitating virtual design thinking workshop work. We are constantly evolving, constantly learning. Curiously, before COVID happened, we had never done a virtual program.
Yeah.
Actually, I was adamantly against the idea, considering ourselves to be an experiential training company, and we would never do it types. Mm-hmm. But then this happened, and we were forced to pivot, and we are now fully virtual, to the extent that I am so convinced about the virtues of virtual that I'm actually debating with my team whether we should even go back to a physical workshop environment anymore.
Yeah.
But the fact is, I think there are a lot of things. It is difficult. It is difficult to engage. It is difficult to get people to switch on their cameras, for instance. For a trainer, it can become extremely lonely staring at a dark screen and a PowerPoint slide. So I think, to me, because I only do design thinking and innovation workshop, and I have enormous admiration for my team that does stuff that seems impossible to do virtually. I think for me, I push for interaction. I am going to force people to talk. I use a lot of Miro, use a lot of tools which are virtual collaboration tools, which kind of help getting people on the same page, and it does real-time collaboration, makes it easier beyond just a breakout room. Then I think there are other stuff that we do where, for instance, we are discovering the value of good old-fashioned stuff like energizers and warm-up exercises, using theater techniques, etc., to get people to listen up and limber up, and doing games to get people to engage better. Because if I I mean, I'm also extremely empathetic to my participants. As we were starting to say that right at the start of the workshop. Many of them are sitting far away, alone, in not the most, learning friendly environments with infrastructure challenges of all sorts. And I'm demanding that he gives me 2 to 3 hours of his attention. I need to think how I can help. I mean, it is design thinking, it's learning experience design. And I think we need to understand what works for them.
Yeah.
I think it's an evolving space. We are constantly learning. But I think the focus should be on less talking and more listening. Less activities and exercises are great, but they shouldn't be the only thing. We need to leave space for reflection and sharing. And there are great virtual tools that we can leverage. There are various ways in which we can excite people. Again, we are facilitators first in our team. And there are a lot of tools, techniques that my colleagues are experts in. I learn a lot from them. And they do beautifully how they can engage teams to run it. So it happens. But overall, I think, Mayur, it's always this, how good the facilitator is in knowledge, experiences, cases they share, how sincere and authentic he or she is. And that, you need to be credible. You need to be worth listening to. Then people will listen to you. And I think I've always kind of believed that, and always upgrade ourselves to be worth listening to. So I'll give you a little sad example. And this is for everyone to think and take away. In the last 15 years, our company has run, for 10 years that I've run, assume that we have run, whatever, if you do let's just say 100 workshops a year and 1,500 workshops. And we have had CEOs coming in for communication, to collaboration, to stakeholder management, to conflict management programs. If I do a survey with my team, in the last 15 years that they have done, they may say 5 designers have come for learning experiences beyond their core skill. Now, I can either assume that all designers are fantastic in all of these skills already because they are inborn great communicators, great stakeholder managers, influencers, conflict managers, etc. Or there isn't enough focus in the company to bring them, or in their own leaders to bring them at par, because these are skills tech guys, HR guys, finance guys, admin guys are all learning.
Yeah.
And I was talking to another CD, chief design officer friend of mine in another European design firm or technology firm, and he said that's a reality. Somehow designers seem the least interested in developing business skills beyond the space of design. If technologists want to learn design thinking, I think it's important designers also think that to join, because designers want to be heard. You want a seat at the table, but it's not going to happen just because one is technically qualified or skilled or is good in design. Business is beyond that, and that I think is a very important point that I always tell my corporate clients, that you need to upskill your designers in business side of things, and I don't see that happen too much. I think that's an important point I wanted to kind of make before I go away.
Sure, it's time for introspection, for sure. This was a gem of a session, Anirban. Thanks for your precious time this evening. This was the first one. It won't be a last one for sure. And thanks everyone for joining the event, and have a nice weekend. We will be in touch soon. Thank you.
Thank you, and all the best, guys.